Bill Gates said, "I will always choose a lazy person to do a difficult job because a lazy person will find an easy way to do it." What's a real life example of this? I got fed up with handwriting itemized suborders at work. So I set up a spreadsheet that you can just fill out. Then I got tired of having more than one program open and not being able to search within among those order sheets, at least not automatically or easily. So I'm having our FileMaker guy integrate it into our greater ordering invoicing system. I was frustrated at the pointlessness of sorting a giant pile of paper invoices from an unpaid stack to a paid stack every month. So I just used the accounting software to keep track. I became so irritated with having to fill out a multi-page, printed spreadsheet for every single order, sometimes just one item, 2 pages in, and frequently there would be those pesky itemized suborders that I condensed the items into most used, put them all on one easy to read sheet, and encouraged my coworker to simply write out the more uncommon items at the bottom. Basically, I hate busy work, and paper invariably leads to busy work. I have tried to reduce the use of paper in our office, but have not been entirely successful. We have to have written order forms available because sometimes the orders are coming in too fast to be able to type it all quickly correctly, and have to keep some paper records for things like organic, FDA, and Astor audits. But all in all, I'd say my absolute hatred of filing has reduced busy work here by at least half. Me. I automate shit all the time at work to make daily routine jobs more easy. I write manuals with screenshots with arrows indicating where to click or where to fill in what. Whenever I write a manual, I assume that whoever reads it is a complete idiot, so that whenever customers call for the same questions again, I just send them to the online manual I created. No need to type it out again by email or explain it again by phone. Does Alexander and the Gordian knot count? A complex knot that, according to prophecy, was to be undone only by the person who was to rule Asia, and that was cut, rather than untied, by Alexander the Great. My boss put my name in for leading a project group shortly after I joined the company. I had no experience whatsoever about project managing, yet he still demanded that I lead the group of 12 people, all way smarter guys, tech background and shit. These guys are like magicians for me, and with way more time at the company. I'm a business guy who's too dumb for balance sheets. That's why I'm in R, and because I quite like the field the most. So we started the first meeting. I asked for everyone's plan, experience and ideas, gathered the different pros and cons, cross-checked with the budget we had, put on a time frame with milestones to reach around 6 months, put in valuable people to consult at different steps. Why did I do that? Because I like organizing stuff and keep everyone on the same page and delegate to DOS. Got promoted because of the success of the project. I asked my boss why he put me in for it, since I never done anything like that. He said because I complained in the first week that most of the work has way too wonky structure, no clear guideline, and this could be improved heavily if we just take some time into it. And because I hated talking to others if I had questions, and I wouldn't get a clear answer, like ask 10 people the same question and you get 15 different answers. In the long run this would make us way more efficient and keeps everyone on the same page. All because I hated disorganized work. The entire miscellaneous kitchen tools section at bed, bath, and beyond. I don't need an avocado slicer or a lemon squeezer or an automatic chopper dicer, but lazy old me definitely puts them to good use. This is a case of ask a lazy person for a solution to handling their work. I got sent out to California on a fact-finding mission about the marijuana growing industry years ago to see if there was a market for the sort of AC work we do, automation controls. I set up meetings with some of the local growers and met with them, discussed their outdoor grow operations. Their biggest complaint was having to go to the grow sites to do various tasks associated with maintaining the crop. I asked them if we could provide a system that could allow you to manage those operations remotely from home. Would you be interested in buying it? Every single guy was like, duck yeah. If I can do it from bed while smoking a spliff, I'd be totally on board for that. That's like my dream come true. So it turns out some of the automation that was developed for that industry was marketed to the inherent laziness of stoners who have an entrepreneurial spirit. My brother gave my oldest nephew $10 a week if he did all his chores without needing to be told or complaining. One day he gets home early from work and sees the neighbor kid tossing a bag in the trash. He asks him what he is doing, and the kid says he gets $5 a week to take care of a few chores. My nephew outsourced his chores. Well, I worked in a graphics design studio as an intern. They mostly had me practice and do some basic stuff their head designers was too busy to do. One was a real estate ad. It had a few basic templates, but it was all kinds of scatterbrained. I would spend 5-10 minutes trying to find the right layer for all the pictures, and had to mess with way too much. So I made copies of the files, and made one for each template. I labeled everything, made it so the images on top of each other wouldn't clip into the lower ones like the previous did. So on. You could be in and out of the template in 2-3 minutes. Showed my boss the difference, and he had this face of well shit. He said the next day that if I was a graduate he'd hire me because I was better than the people sending applications in. In short, I made an overly complicated unorganized thing the opposite, and my boss was actually sad he couldn't hire me. I had to carry groceries into the house when I was a kid. I didn't want to make multiple trips, so I tied several bags to the belt loops on my pants to do it in one trip. I'm doing it right now. Automated data cleaning in Python. My coworkers don't know about it, so something that takes me 10 minutes at most takes them 2 hours. For everyone who says I should share my code, I even set up a private GitHub space for my team. Some have taken it up, but others including management do not like it. I think they feel a little threatened. I worked for the state doing data entry of a sort. We got scans of forms that people had filled out, and we had to go through and make sure the numbers that the computer had pulled from the scan matched what was written, since it wasn't entirely accurate. So, the software we used showed us all the scanned documents and overlaid fields right next to any point where the scanner found numbers, with the number the machine determined was written already in the field. The job was essentially looking at each field and making sure the number right next to it was the same. If it wasn't, fix it. We didn't duck with any of the text, it was just the numbers. Now, these scans included all of the paperwork submitted by each person, including like a dozen pages with no data whatsoever. It was just the beginning of the document that the person read before they filled out the actual forms and stuff. There was also a section just after the middle that was several more pages of information for the person. My trainer showed me how to do all this. He accepted a new document from the queue and pressed the down arrow key to scroll through the beginning section until he got to the first field. He made sure the numbers matched and repeated this process for several minutes before excusing himself and telling me I could come grab him if I had any questions. I sat down at the computer and took a look around the room. Literally every screen I could see from where I was sitting. People were actively scrolling. Some were using mouse wheel. Most used the down arrow. I accepted a new document from the queue, and I pushed the tab button. The program instantly brought me to the first field a dozen pages down. I smirked to myself, compared the field to the written text, and repeated that process instead. I did go back and scroll through that first document to ensure I hadn't missed anything due to a goof in the software or anything like that. Near the end of my second day, I was called into my boss's office and asked what I'd been doing the past 2 days. Turns out, as of day 2, I was churning through 5 or 6 times the amount of documents a day compared to people who'd been working there for years. My boss assumed I was just clicking through new documents without doing any work and was very much acting like he had caught me red-handed. I asked if they reviewed the documents I finished to ensure that I'd done the work. He replied that they hadn't, but it was obviously impossible to go through that many pages in the time it took me to do it. I told him that I knew for a fact that if he went through any of my work, he'd see everything was fine. He pulled one of my finished documents at random and spent several minutes scrolling through it, shaking his head to himself, staring daggers at the screen. He admitted that this document was fine. but it would take hours for his assistant manager to review all my work. Can I show you something? Could you please pull up another random document of mine? He rolled his eyes, but he did it. I stood up from my chair, came around the desk, and I hit tab. He was looking at the screen like it was witchcraft. I showed him the field matched, and tabbed my way through the rest of the fields, confirming the rest of the numbers as I did. I finished reviewing the whole document with him in less than a minute. He asked me if my trainer showed me that. I replied that he hadn't, but it was a universal keyboard shortcut that I'd been using since the early 90s. This happened in 2013. By the way, he just looked at me for a bit and then said he had to talk to his assistant manager about the whole thing before asking me to go back to work. Later, I'm heading out at the end of the day when my boss asks me to come over to his office. He fires me for not taking the job seriously and potentially causing delays to taxpayers due to inaccuracies. I actually laughed at him after he got done with his spiel. And that's the story of how I managed to flummox several state employees with a highly controversial use of the tab button. Still blows my mind. A few years back, my sister was doing some hardware testing and validation. She was working with a bunch of Excel tables. When she found out that I was doing some automatic XLS creating editing for my job, she had me create a script for her job. 3 days of eye-killing boring work done in 20 seconds. She kept it a secret for a while. The worst task became the best task. She eventually shared it with the company as there were many others that did a similar job. And then she got promoted. In conclusion, her lasagnas helped with her promotion. An engineer spent hours developing a program so they could start the coffee pot from their desk and not have to wait for coffee when arriving in the break room. My ex-boss gave me an Excel sheet, 124.000 rows Excel sheet, had all the company customer data per row twice. In some of those duplicates there was an error. She needed me to go over the list one row by row to check for mistakes and mark all the faulty entries I could find. Through 124.000 rows. She wanted me to do that using the arrow down key in my mouse. I thanked her. I sat down, invested half an hour into Google, copy pasted some parts of this formula, then some parts of that. Finally I had figured out the formula. I double clicked the tiny rectangle so that the formula gets applied on all rows. Worked like a charm. I stood up, got myself a coffee, talked to some colleagues. Then I went to my boss. She had anticipated that I would need 3 days for this task. When I was back less than an hour later, she thought I hadn't understood the task or maybe a follow-up question. I will never forget the expression on her face when I told her I was done. There were 6 faulty entries. A year and a half later I enrolled into computer science at university, where I will finish my undergrad this summer. I don't know if this is a true story, but kind of fits your request. There was a manufacturing plant that made toothpaste. One year for some reason there ended up being an unusually high number of empty boxes being shipped out. So in order to stop that from happening, the head of the company hired a couple engineers to develop a system to catch any empty boxes so they didn't get shipped with the boxes that actually had the toothpaste tubes in them. The engineers developed a system that, if the box weighed below a certain amount, the system would stop and a worker would have to go remove the box and start everything up again. The person in charge loved the idea and implemented it immediately, and right from the get-go the number of empty boxes shipped dropped to near zero. The head of the company wanted to go see the system in action, so he goes and visits the plant one day and notices a huge fan right by the assembly line. Very confused as it wasn't hot, he asked the plant manager why the fan was there. The plant manager said the workers were tired of stopping what they were doing to remove an empty box, so they just hooked up a fan to blow the empty boxes off the scale before the system recognized it was empty and shut everything off. So laziness led to a more efficient and cost-effective plan. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe,